Hello and welcome to our webinar. Today we're talking about understanding how your school brand works, or how does that brand work? What is a brand indeed? So without further ado, let me introduce myself. I'm Andrew Sculthorpe, Business Director at Image 7, the follically challenged gentleman as you're looking at the screen. And unless I'm mistaken, I can hear a chuckle from Brad Entwistle. Hello, Brad.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world.
Yes, well, it's great to have you here, and we're going to go in some depth about romping through all about branding, all things branding. Who are we? We work for Image 7. Image 7 is a marketing communications firm based in Australia, and we've got a hub here in Perth, in Western Australia. We've got members of the team throughout Australia, in Adelaide, Sydney and Brisbane, and indeed we have an Ireland and UK office too. So we've been working with schools for over 20 years now. So we're here to share some of our thoughts, some of our insights, and in fact to help you to learn from one or two mistakes that we couldn't possibly have made, but other people might have done. So without further ado, let me...
Well, can I just jump in and just recognise that we've got a map there, but we've got people joining this webinar from, of course, all over Australia, New Zealand, UK, Ireland, and the US. So welcome to you all.
Yes, great to have you on board. Now, the burning question, Brad, really, what does a brand have to do with me?
Well, it is the burning question, and brand is one of the most misunderstood areas of marketing, and quite frankly confusing, because if you've ever done the good old Google search and you enter brand and then have a look at even brand definitions, there's more to choose from than a smorgasbord of options of what you could believe brand is and how to deal with it. So this is our experience, 25 years, dare I say it, makes me feel old, but it is the question for schools: what does a brand have to do with me, and what does a school brand look like? So a few things first up. Let's just set the scene. A brand is more than a logo. Logo is just your visual identity, and I don't mean just to diminish it, but it is just one part of the brand. The visual identity is a very specific part of the brand, but it's not the entirety of your brand. So the brand it's more than a facade, it's more than just a layer on top or an image. And more specifically, and this is what we'll be looking at today, a brand is the life of an organisation, and you can express it many ways, but 4 ways we're going to talk about today: the brand positioning, the brand promise, the traits, sometimes called core values, and the brand story. So the definition of a brand, Scully, we've got a working definition.
We do have a working definition, and if we're going too fast for anyone, let me urge you that we will in fact email you a link to listen to this webinar again, and I urge you to ask any questions. So if you look in on the GoToWebinar control panel, you'll be able to ask questions, and Brad and I will be delighted to answer them at the end of this webinar. And so urge you to be as interactive as you like. Tell us your thoughts or your specific issues that you'd like to raise. Now, the definition of a brand. It's who you are, okay? It's actually who you are, what you're about, what you promise, but it's important that you deliver on that promise, and it's your willingness and ability to keep that promise. It's not just an empty promise. You soon get found out. So, yeah, we work very much, and we use this almost as a filter to define, okay, this is what you are, this is what you say you are, and you promise to your customer base, your audience, whatever you want to call them, and then, importantly, your ability to live up to that promise. But don't be conned into thinking that you own your brand just because you think you have a brand, just because you have, but in fact it's not as easy as that. Just because you think our brand represents this or is symbolized by that, that's not necessarily the case. You're basically what people think you are. So how do you put color into your brand? How do you bring it to life? Because people will draw conclusions about you whether you like it or not. So how do we influence those things? So just because you think you have a brand or you think you have an identity, it's not as simple as that. So in order to do that, you've got to position yourselves. So how do you position that brand? What is brand positioning, Brad?
Well, really good question. And just in case people are thinking that Scully and I aren't bouncing to and fro, we're working a little bit blind. Scully's in Perth, I'm in Sydney, so today. But what is the brand positioning? Well, throughout this, we're going to show you some examples, and we're not going to show you examples of schools because then you'd have to know the school to understand the brand. So what we're going to do is show you some consumer type examples that you'd be very familiar with and you will be able to know and understand. So the brand position as a statement it just describes what you do and for whom you do it. It's quite simple, really. It's not flowery, it's not exceptional, but it's very succinct and real. And it identifies that benefit to the customer. In your case, the parent. Why is sending my child to your school going to be beneficial? And it demonstrates what we like to call the unfair advantage over competitors. It's great to have an unfair advantage, and almost every school that we work with, they've got their special thing, their thing that makes them attractive, and that's wonderful. But most of the time, it's not demonstrated. So your brand position needs to demonstrate that unfair advantage, as we like to call it, over competitors. So here's our consumer example. Avis, we try harder. In fact, the full tagline was, "We're number 2, we try harder." And that very clearly positions them as the people who are striving hardest to be the best and to earn the business of the customers. Now, interestingly, they started with that "We're number 2, we try harder" campaign right back in 1962 and only stopped using it in 2012, so 50 years later. It served them really well, and the day that they launched with that "We're number 2, we try harder," what was then the market dominance of Hertz actually became a weakness because they'd positioned that being number two, they are going to try harder. So Scully, moving on from that, the next one, what's a brand promise?
Promises. And by the way, I said before, I really urge you, please send in any questions you may have along the way. We've already got a couple, and we'd love to hear more from you. Well, the brand promise, to be honest, is the single most important thing your organization promises to your customers. But you've got to live up to it, as I said earlier. So it's a case of sitting back and thinking long and hard, or workshopping really. Consider what your parents, your staff, your suppliers, anyone with any touch point at all with your school, with your organization, should expect from every interaction. What is it you actually deliver? What is it the experience that people feel? Whether it's delight or not, it's a case of working out really what do we deliver regularly, day after day. Now, in defining that, it becomes part of your value proposition. Now, the value proposition is not a fancy advertising slogan. It's really not an out-facing term at all. It's about defining the core of what you're about, the very essence of your organization, and the impact it has on people's lives. So weigh every decision against this promise. So you've worked out your value proposition, and then weigh every decision in terms of your marketing communications against this promise, to be sure it really reflects the promise and is on brand, on track, or at least it must not contradict the promise that's been made. So you've got to live up to that promise, and that really defines the core of what you're about. So who are you, what is it that the best symbolizes you, what are your values, what are your missions, and really think about those elements, and then just the day-to-day delivery of those. Okay, that's what you're about, that's the promise, that's the customer experience, if you like. Now go forth and communicate.
So Scully, here's a good consumer example with a really big promise.
Exactly. Now Hungry Jack's is a major burger outlet here in Australia. For those of you overseas, you'll notice Burger King actually. Well, in Australia, the reason we put this up is they had a pretty strong brand promise. They stated to the world and his wife in all slogans, the tagline was, the burgers are better at Hungry Jack's. So their promise was quite simply, what we deliver is better than anybody else. Now that's a big call, and you've got to try and live up to it. They paid an ad agency a lot of money a few years ago who came up with a new slogan. Sales dropped within months, and guess what? They're back with the burgers are better at Hungry Jack's. So, right or wrong, maybe a slightly extreme example, but it stood up to be counted and said the burgers are better at Hungry Jack's. So there's a very simple promise that this brand made to its marketplace and was prepared to stand by that. Brad?
And, well, here's another example. Not that long ago, Scully and I were interstate travelling and actually talking about this branding with a meeting of clients in a seminar room, and we stayed in a hotel. And right there in the hotel, there were the little card from Anne with her mobile number on it, and the promise, if there's any hitches, ring, and they've got 15 minutes to sort it out. That's a classic brand promise. It goes along with the Ibis Hotel's promise. Very clear that they've connected the brand and the promise together. Now, moving on to our next is what is a brand trait, and this can possibly be one of the most confusing elements of a brand. So, as a way of being clearer, it's just a way of illustrating what your organisation wants to be known for. In your case, your school. If you got really clever and had the time and resources, you could start to burrow down two parts, like sports teams or something like that. But think about it. What does your school want to be known for by everybody outside of your organisation? And then think of personality traits that you'd like to be used to describe your organisation. So you could be fun, you could be studious, you could be serious, you could be friendly, you could be caring. But the thing is, most schools will come up with lots and lots of brand traits. Try and keep it to 4 or 6. No magic number in 4 or 6. It's just about the right number so that it doesn't get too washed out. Too many, and you can't concentrate on any of them. So I'm about to put a logo up in front of you, a brand that you'll all know. Think about what's the first word that comes to mind. And there it is, Virgin, along with all the Virgin Money, Virgin Airlines, Virgin everything, it seems, these days. But usually the first things that come to mind are brand traits like fun, innovation, quality, sense of competitive challenge, also competitive, and that sort of stuff. Is that what Virgin does for you, Scully?
Oh, yeah. Irreverent is another word. Irreverent and adventure. But whatever it is, yeah, instantly there's almost an emotional link. Whether you like it or not, that's a personal choice. But you see that, and it's synonymous with all sorts of things. Absolutely.
And so, Scully, one of the things that Virgin do well is actually tell their brand story.
Well, of course, they have a personification of the brand, don't they, in their case? But yeah, what is a brand story? What is Some organisations really struggle with this, particularly perhaps in professional services. They feel like they're very grey and all the rest of it. But in fact, that's not usually the case. There's always a point of difference. And schools, it just lends itself beautifully. Whatever the history, whatever the reason that the school was founded, whether that was 6 months ago or 150 years ago, you can guarantee there's a unique history, background, mission, values, vision. So it's a wonderful rich heritage usually that you can use to highlight how your offering grew out of the past, the background, and to articulate what you're about, what you stand for, and what has come from you. So schools can be so. I mean, people may say we're not unique. Well, they're pretty close. Schools, even if you've got a competitor down the road that appears to be very similar, I guarantee there'll be standout points. So work out the history, what you're about, and then it's a great opportunity in the description of your brand story to illustrate that sort of philosophy, methodology, maybe faith-based, whatever it may be, and how those actually impact the offer in marketing terms to your customers, to your students, to your potential students, to your parents, and summarize that offering succinctly, I hasten to add, so that people can really grasp what you're about and understand, wow, that offering is exactly what I'm after. Or even if it isn't, that's fine, but stand up to be counted, and that's a wonderful place within the brand story to do that.
So brand stories, of course, don't just have to be words. They can be told in all sorts of ways, and of course pictures is one of them.
Spot on, yeah. Here's a beautiful example. As a brand, yes, we all know Coca-Cola. Heaven only knows where this image is taken, or let's say Outer Mongolia for sake of argument. But it's cleverly communicated. If you think about the core of this brand happens to be a soft drink, but the imagery it says so much about the brand. It's a fun thing. You don't drink alone. You drink with friends. There's the anticipation of the next of the experience of drinking. It's a social occasion, and it's an uplifting one. Straight away, you don't see some lonely old guy sitting in a corner drinking out of a Coke bottle in an advert. The imagery symbolizes the messages that they want to get across. Great photography.
Never drink Coke alone. Here's another one from that very same hotel. In this case, the story is in words, but this is on the wall in the foyer of the hotel for all of the patrons and for the staff to read and to know exactly what it is that the Accor Hotel Group stands for. Now, the question then becomes, what's your story in terms of brand story? What's your story? And it's got a way of condensing down the story, and we typically try and express it in 200 to 300 words. So writing it down is usually the best place to start. But when you try and express it in 200 to 300 words, you're really shaving off all of the extraneous stuff and getting down to the core of what is the brand story, and communicating that compelling vision, the purposeful culture, and the brand experience that people are going to have. So what's your story? Your brand is the story. When you know the brand story of your school, it really develops this school-wide sense of purpose and identity. And in your marketing communications, your decision-making becomes easier and so much more efficient, because the brand story and the brand always points true north for all of your marketing and decision-making that follows from there. So when you put all of those things together, you end up, and execute it well, that's a very important part, but you end up with an asset, a brand asset. And just this morning I was looking at some latest research which listed the value of big brands, and quite interestingly, Apple was on the top of the list for brand value. But Lego was on the top of the other list, which was how much leverage they could get out of their brand. The Lego movie recently has done wonders for the Lego brand. Lego is a really interesting case study to look at. But let's just run through some brand assets. What's a Nokia? Well, most of us all know it as an old phone brand that has seen better days. But Nokia, the actual company, goes back well over 100 years. And but a Nokia is a nothing in terms of the name. It is not a real word for anything. It's like Kodak. It's a made-up word. So a name, a company name, absolutely can be a brand asset. Of course, as we've talked about, a logo. We all recognise what this one is. It's the first Apple logo. Once they inverted commas became a real business. There was, challenge you, go just Google Apple logo and you'll see the very first one, which is quite amazing. This one is a lot simpler. So a logo can be very much a brand asset. This one, the tagline. It is just a tagline. Just do it is just a tagline. It's not the logo and it's not the company name, but we all know what it is, and in a lot of ways it's just as strong, if not stronger, than the logo. So taglines can be a brand asset. Characters, spokespersons can be brand assets. Ronald McDonald here. Whether you think he's scary or whether you think he's fantastic, Ronald McDonald is a brand asset. In fact, we were just talking Virgin before, so much like Richard Branson actually is a brand asset for Virgin. And then you've got imagery, and these are images all from Powerade, always shot in the same way, in that underexposed, high contrast sort of way, and very much they say Powerade. When you see a picture of athletes in that way, immediately you can associate it with Powerade. So that brings us to brand associations. Scully, I'll let you pick it up here.
Yeah, just to recap. I mean, there's all of these brand promises we've talked about, but just to get to the core of what you will have, what that brand that exists, I guarantee now, at the very least, you will have a name, you would assume, and if not, you'll want to create one. Then, of course, there's the logo, maybe a crest, but ultimately your visual identity and how that is reproduced in terms of perhaps the email footer or the letterhead or whatever it is on the website. So all these different brand associations and how the brand is reproduced. The tagline is one that was mentioned with Just Do It. Again, it can be very useful way to symbolize what you're about. And then, of course, the use of the imagery, the color, the typeface, all trying to bring the brand to life, to give it air to breathe and really communicate the very core of what they're about. But what else is there around? There's actually, be amazed if you think long and hard about how else or what else you can do, or might be brand associations. Harley Davidson, for example, have trademarked that sort of throaty rumble of their engine. So that sound is synonymous with them. It's a brand association. Singapore Airlines, there's a smell whenever you get onto a Singapore Airlines plane, which is meant to symbolize, great, peace, harmony, I'm in a safe place, great place to travel. So there can be odors. Brumby's do it well with a bakery shop. Brumby's is a bakery chain here in Australia. That wonderful smell of freshly baking bread. So there's some other examples there. I bet you turned your computer on this morning, whether it be an Apple or a PC, who knows, but there would have been a distinctive sound, Microsoft sound or an Apple's ding. And again, all of those things are brand associations which are synonymous with that brand. And these haven't happened by accident. They've been consciously designed to represent the brand, to reinforce what you're about. So it's another key question time. What is branding? You may say, well, what really the core is, what really is it? What is the act of branding? How do you go about doing this? What does it mean? All these disparate bits, how do you pull them all together? So it's about creating and enhancing those brand assets, or in the case of Ronald McDonald, perhaps a brand liability. Whoops, allegedly. So it's how we can
end us up in court.
Allegedly, yeah. Creating and enhancing the brand asset, and then about leveraging your organization's personality. So how can you really get to the core of what you're about, that personality, to create the customer relationship, to enhance it, to first of all work out what it is, and then represent it, so it can be replicated and communicated to the world and his wife. So it's the essence, the core, the very core of your organization. So really delivering what is promised. Even more would be fantastic, but never less. If you deliver less, well, you'll soon get caught out. So if you promise the world and don't deliver, that's no good. So part of the process, the workshopping, whatever it is that you go through to define your brand, has to really understand what you're about, and that you actually deliver that. And it's absolutely vital. Differentiate yourself from the competition, particularly with schools. I guarantee there are points of difference in everything that you do. And really, it's better to be judged, quite frankly, than it is to be ignored. Stand up for something, be counted, stand up for a point of difference, not just for the sake of it, but I'm sure at the very core of your organization there are things that you stand for, you represent, and you should be counted. You should be seen as representative of those ideas or those brand assets, or those values. Now, but all of this comes with a safety warning, a health warning. Now, it takes a long time to develop these things. They're not happened overnight. Certainly the examples we've used haven't happened overnight. But the brand can be destroyed, or at least severely damaged, in seconds, particularly in this world of social media and all the rest of it. Be conscious that you've got to protect the brand. You've got to really police the brand, and in order to maintain what it's about, and people know it for the positives as opposed to the negatives. So it takes time and consistency to develop it and build it, but it can be torn down very, very quickly. So the next question, why brand at all? What do you reckon?
Well, it is the question. Why should we actually spend time, money, and resources being concerned about our brand? And well, we need to be able to answer that question. And in short, brands provide value to your customers by making it easy for them to interpret what you do. You look at those brand examples that we've used today. Most of them you'd be able to look at and look at the logo, and you'd be able to go, that's the brand. You've got an idea of what they stand for and what they do. So that's the easy interpretation part. So rather than starting with a blank sheet of paper with everybody that you communicate to, then you're using the shortcuts of brand in explaining what you do and the position that you take. And of course, it increases the confidence in their purchase decision. If you've got a brand that's known for delivering and delivering on the promise, whatever your promise is, but for all of us today, we can be pretty sure that the promise is about a good education for the parent's child, then we've got to be able to deliver on that. And the brand is a way of delivering increased confidence in that really important purchase decision. Flip over to the other side though. What's it do from an organisational point of view? Well, it improves efficiency and effectiveness of your marketing. In short, when you've got a strong brand, you don't have to spend as much money on reinforcing who you are and basically seeking enrolments. Strong brands actually contribute to spending less resources, whether that's time, money, or something else, on your marketing. And when you've got a strong brand, of course, that increases your income, read enrolments, and the potential of your school to deliver on its mission. And it creates a competitive advantage. It goes without saying that a strong brand can outweigh and outlive a weak brand. And building organisational equity. It's a bit of perhaps a deep concept, but if you've got a school with a strong brand and they bump into some headwinds, something not catastrophic but hard happens in the community, which would make people think, should we be spending this money? Should we be going to this school? Then an organisation that has got deep organisational equity, if you like, a bunch of equity in the bank, in your bank account, in your brand bank account, then you'll be able to withdraw some of that brand equity and use it, and people will still trust you. However, if you haven't got much in the bank, you're a weak brand, then there's not much there before it all comes crashing down around you. So they're the if you like, the core reasons why brand. So next time you're talking to the principal or the business manager, you can quite confidently talk about those. But a really quick branding footnote, because we've got to get to questions. Your brand equity is built by being consistent. This is about being consistent. Don't be tempted to chop and change. Create the brand that you're going to build and constantly focus on, and be consistent about that. And then that brand management requires a long-term commitment and consistency. So without being too blatant with bold type there, you can see a consistent theme coming through here, and it's all about consistency. Changing ideas which way, every which way, every term doesn't build a strong brand. And Scully.
Yes, well, as I mentioned earlier, we do indeed have some questions. So I've decided it's time to put you on the spot, Brad. So question number 1 from Brendan. It sounds a lot like the brand is closely aligned with strategic planning, vision, mission, etc. Is it better to concurrently do this process with strategic planning, or separately after completion?
That is an insightful question. It should follow them, because the brand that we're creating here, in terms of managing and amplifying, is used to support the school's vision and mission. Don't get me wrong, though; those are critically important to the brand, and they will have a lot of strong influence on how you go about articulating your brand. So absolutely, school strategy, vision, values, mission first. Usually that's not the domain of the marketing team solely. Great if you can have a voice in it, and then use that to create all of articulate the brand as we've been talking about today.
And talking of who should be involved in this process, Jenny asks, how do I get teachers and other staff to embrace my school's brand?
With difficulty. No, the teachers are, and I'm totally conscious that there's more than likely teachers in our audience today. Teachers generally have difficulty, if you like, buckling down and following the brand. If you like, following the brand guidelines. But it's important because it's about that consistency, and everybody in an organisation is a marketer in the sense of everybody contributes to the brand. If you've got a brand for your school that says you're caring, and yet you've got a teacher who's known to be a real grumpy pants and just puts down the students all the time, well, that's not supporting the brand. Without even any comment about whether it's good educationally. So that type of understanding everybody's a marketer, it's engaging teachers, all staff, not just teachers, but all staff in the process, and but really there's a term that's common in the industry, which is the brand Nazi, and for most of you, that's going to be you. You're the person who is the custodian of the brand. You've actually got to make the hard calls. You've got to get the principal to stand shoulder to shoulder with you and say, no, that's off-brand. That's not our brand. We're going to fix it.
Good work. Good advice. And James seems to think his brand is bad, or rather their brand, wherever he comes from. Should they rebrand? Yeah,
possibly, but and we'd probably really have to have a bit of a longer conversation there to fully understand it. But most of the time, not. There's some times when rebranding is worthwhile and the right step, but most of the time it's about the real question is delivering on the promise. So if you think your brand is broken, well, there's really two parts to it. One is it the promise that's broken and you're not delivering on the service that you promised to parents? In which case you've got to work on fixing that promise first. If it's, however, that your visual identity, expressing that part of the brand, is tired or old or doesn't express who you are as a school anymore, that's when usually what a rebrand is called is when you're rejigging the visual identity, and that's either updating it or totally creating a new one. And changing that could go as far as changing the name. Well, that's fairly rare for a school just to change its name midstream. So usually when you rebrand, what you're doing is you're going, what am I trying to signal to the marketplace? And rebranding, changing the logo, freshening up is usually a signal to the marketplace to say, have a look at us again, reconsider us. We're not what you might think we were in the past.
Thank you very much, Brad, for those pearls of wisdom. Great stuff. And thank you indeed, everyone, for listening. That brings us to the close of the formal proceedings, if you like. Now you can look out for an email from us with the webinar recording and resources. And if you can't wait for the email, don't worry. You can log on to image7.com.au /webinar resources to get the information instead. And I'm sure there'll be loads more questions once you've sort of processed this information. So we'd like to offer you a free 20-minute consultation. So happy to get back with more specific and perhaps deeper answers than we're able to do during the webinar. And if you're after more resources, and we've got plenty of them, then please feel free to subscribe to our regular publications as our SMC e-newsletter, weekly, our fortnightly podcast, SMC, and there's more webinars to come. So please go online, have a look at image7.com.au, and feel free to download or contact us, and we'd be very, very happy to talk directly with you. And the next webinar, indeed, is titled, Is Your Website Working for You? Obviously incredibly important for all of us in this day and age. Is your website working for you? That's coming out on the 13th of May. So make sure you register for that, which again you can do online at image7.com.au. So thank you very much, and God bless. Bye now.
Bye for now.